Oh, welcome, Simon's Trading Channel. Happy Friday. It's the end of another week. And let's face it, it's not been a very good one for Bitcoin. Anyway, let's just look at it as an opportunity rather than something negative. That's certainly the way I'm looking at it. Now, let's get straight on with the price action analysis. And I'm actually going to start in lower time frames and work my way up. So you can see my last video was a bit more of a sort of overall, like I didn't go into any specifics, but you can see this big long range that didn't go anywhere until the breakdown, which kind of roughly happened on Tuesday, so just a few days ago, and it's been pretty much all the way down since. However, there's a pretty healthy bounce going on the moment on the 4-hour time frame, and we can talk, or I can talk about that now. Now, and so you can see a bounce. It definitely is a bounce. However, momentum is very much to the downside here on the MACD. Has been really since Bitcoin started to, when Bitcoin was in its low volatility environment and the price was below the midpoint. That was probably confirmed. So the downside move that could occur was then confirmed as momentum shifted down to the downside, and then volatility expanded to the downside. So the writing was definitely on the wall. Now, volatility is now cooling off, and generally when that happens after a volatile move, you get a counter-directional move. And it all depends on how swiftly this happens. Bearing in mind it's Friday now, so coming into the weekend, maybe volatility cools off a bit. No, that doesn't make sense. Maybe there won't be as much kind of trading around this price action. But so far from the low, which I think was about, sort of 70, healthy bounce up to where price action is at the moment, which lo and behold is close to where the midpoint of the Bollinger Band is right now, and that's about 85K. Now, in theory, it could bounce all the way up to the top here at 91 and not change much in the context of volatility and the direction of that move. I don't know if that made any sense. But the point I'm trying to make is bounces from here are probably just that. It would have, for this to be an up and down move, I talked about this in my last video, but I think it's very unlikely this is a down and up move because, well, basically Bitcoin needs to get back above about 95. So it's about $10,000 away from that. Now, I'm not saying that's impossible, but based on the impulsivity of this move down here and the market context and, lots of negativity, I don't think it's likely. Doesn't mean it won't happen, just means I don't think it's likely. So yeah, for the 4-hour, I think sort of for now, if Bitcoin can get back above 85, that would be very good. I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen. But we shall see. And volatility is cooling off on the 4-hour time frame. The daily, let's have a look at that. So check in on momentum as soon as it loads up. That's also to the downside. Having been to the downside for quite some time, but just going sideways, and obviously in the last few days with that move down, it indeed has moved down itself. This daily candle's got 5 hours left, but that's a pin candle. They are, they can be associated with bottoms. Sounds a bit rude. And the CME gap over here has nearly been filled. I don't know how accurate one needs to be when filling a gap, but as you can see, this wicked basically the whole of the CME gap over here. So you could argue, and I'm sure the most bullish of Bitcoiners probably will be looking at that sort of pin bar on the daily candle, and I wouldn't blame them and say, oh, that's it now, that's the downside done. Let's get back to more upside. And I wouldn't blame them, but I'm not willing to make that presumption myself, particularly as you can see that the daily is still kind of expanding its volatility. That will obviously change or may change with today's closure, which will occur in 5 hours' time. But I need to see some more price action to suggest otherwise, because at the moment the daily momentum to the downside, the 4 hours to the downside, the move is to the downside, the trend is to the downside. So, is it a bottom? It might be. I think what's more likely is it may remain the bottom, but price doesn't just go ba-ding, and maybe price spends a bit of time here. It might, do a bit of this business and then makes a move up, maybe towards the latter part of March. So yeah, we'll see. Let me get rid of my scribblings, which I will do very simply by doing this. And because it's Friday, of course, let's check in on CME's weekly candle, which isn't going to look particularly rosy. And there it is. And, another good reason to potentially look for at least sideways and down, or maybe sideways rather than a big burst to the upside straight away. And that is, of course, it looks like this weekly candle is going to close below the midpoint of the Bollinger Band on the weekly time frame, which is currently at 92. And you can see how the volatility is cooling off a lot. Now, the support resistance is, in my mind, for the weekly time frame, a little bit lower than where price has got to at the moment, which is basically the CME gap. Weekly support resistance I see coming in somewhere near the bottom Bollinger Band at the moment, so about 70. Now, I don't know if price is going to get down now on the weekly time frame, and the scribblings that I drew on the previous chart, I think could, potentially occur. Well, of course they'll occur in this because it's the same chart, but I'll redraw them on the weekly. That to me would look like continuation of bull run. And if you can imagine at that point, it's likely the Bollinger Bands will have narrowed off. And the midpoint will be somewhere, but you can see a weekly low volatility setup, hopefully with price above the midpoint of the Bollinger Band. And then if volatility does expand, which it always does, that'll be an upside move. The counter argument, of course, is the longer that the price action stays below the midpoint of the Bollinger Band in a low volatility environment, the more likely it will expand to the downside. For me personally, and this has been the case so far in this bull run, every volatile move with expanding Bollinger Bands has been to the upside. First one was here, volatility expanding to the upside. Volatility cooled off. This is a weekly, remember. Volatility expanding to the upside, volatility cooled off. No expansion to the downside, more or less. Volatility expanded to the upside. So for me personally, the bull run's going to start to look a bit fragile if we get weekly volatility expansion to the downside. And what would that look like? It would look like this sort of thing. With the Bollinger Bands expanding to the downside. I don't feel like that's likely. But I could well be wrong because, as I've said probably a million times, no one can predict the future. And the reason I've said it that many times is because it's true. So yeah, very bearish weekly closure coming up for CME. A decent bounce on the lower time frames here on the 4 hour. Where could it come up to? Didn't really cover that. There's a whole bunch of price action here. It could easily there you go. It could easily bounce up to 90k and nothing would really change. It would still be, in my opinion, downside postured. And the current top of the Bollinger Band is there, but for it to bounce and meet that Bollinger Band, it would have to do so very quickly, because as you can imagine, if the bounce doesn't continue in a meaningful way over time, then the Bollinger Bands narrow in and you end up with, low volatility again. So we'll see. Part of me thinks it probably won't get much above 85 over 86 over the weekend. But again, that's a pure subjective guess. So for now, lower time frames are all to the downside. I do wonder if filling that CME gap means that the best buy you'll get for Bitcoin in so far this year will be 78K. But that all remains to be seen. And so I'll leave you with that. And I wish you a nice weekend. And I'll see you again soon. Oh, and like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Goodbye.